Hey everybody, California Republican here. I wanted to do the political compass test for you for the very first episode of the California Republican. I wanted to sort of demonstrate, which I haven't done the political compass test in a couple of years, probably during COVID when there wasn't much going on out here during the lockdowns. I like to call them lockdowns instead of the pandemic. I think that lockdowns is a more accurate descriptor to what took place, particularly in places like Los Angeles County. But I wanted to do this political compass test. I wanted to see what it shows and perhaps what a California Republican believes. And I forgot exactly how the X and Y axis go, or how the sort of the scatter chart goes, but I would see myself as, if you have very liberal, somewhat liberal, central, and then the same on the right, somewhat conservative, and then very conservative. I'd probably be in the conservative, right in between very and some conservative. I'd probably be around there, and we'll get into what the specific policies and procedures are that I subscribe to, or what I believe. But let's start with the political compass test. So, 22 years. Welcome. It's timely to stress that the political compass test has been on the internet since 2001. The uniqueness of our take on politics is reflected in the gratifyingly enthusiastic reviews we've enjoyed in the national media. National media, that's a red flag right there. Of many countries from our earliest years, as well as from many teachers and academics who continue to use our work. Again, I guess we'll see what happens here. Perhaps they're just tailoring this to a wider population. So let's just take the test, right? Test. Before taking the test, please note that this isn't a survey and these aren't questions. They're propositions. To question the logic of individual ones that irritate you is to miss the point. Some propositions are extreme and some are moderate. That's how we can show you whether you lean towards extremism or moderation on the compass. Your responses should not be overthought. Some of them are intentionally vague. Their purpose is to trigger reactions in the mind, measuring feelings and prejudices rather than detailed opinions on policy, right? So they're trying to get to the core of what you are, and that would probably come about based upon your upbringing, where you grew up, who you grew up around, what schools you went to, how long you went to school for, what books did you read, what podcasts do you listen to, everything that sort of contributes to that essential you on the inside, rather than looking at something and considering it thoughtfully, which I guess right out the gate, I take somewhat issue with that, where sure, the idea is that it'll get to your core essence, your just automatic reaction, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily how we want to consider these. I believe that there's probably a good mix between the emotional inner side of what you react to on a deep, visceral level versus what you consider and what you think about and what you see as the most rational and reasonable conclusion, which is why I decided to call this channel the California Republican, to kind of give some nuance to what it means to be out here in the Los Angeles area as a conservative Republican. So anyways, let's get into it. Page 1 of 6. Just a few propositions to start with concerning no less how you see the country and the world. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Well, you have to kind of define some of these terms. Like, if globalization is inevitable, you should primarily serve humanity. So what does humanity mean, rather than the interests of transnational corporations? Now, of course, corporations, that's a pretty loaded word. You've seen over the past year there's been a small boycott, revolt against institutions such as Disney, Target, and Bud Light. And it makes one believe that, sure, the purpose of a business is to generate profit, but when you start to see businesses that are either pandering to certain groups, or B, flagrantly disregarding values or principles that perhaps they at one time stood for, or a group of people that they once were related to, or had a relation to, and to subordinate those values and principles in order to increase your profits. That's where things start to get a little messy, and perhaps that's how it's always been, and perhaps that's most businesses, is that business, the profit over an established set of values that might be seen as arbitrary in the business world. And of course, times change and economies evolve, and not all businesses are like that. And being a business owner myself, the primary concern is to make money. I guess when you get into corporations, though, where I would assume we're talking about, if it's transnational, that means publicly traded corporations, that tends to get a more liberal leaning over time, a wider pool of people, and then when you start talking about just not Americans, but people from different continents and countries, you're going to have a more diverse and liberal set of opinions. But it should, so if economic, sorry for getting on a little tangent there, but if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity. So as in humanity, does that mean that every single person in the world, regardless of what they've done, what atrocities have happened, what good or bad they have done, that they all deserve sort of like a baseline of human life, of like food and water and things of that nature? That's hard to tell. Just today, I'm filming this on October 7th, 2023. Hamas just attacked Israel, and Israel has now declared war on Hamas. So you see these videos on Twitter of this girl that just very brutal things that it appears the Hamas people are doing to the Israeli people, or people that they even think are Israeli. Apparently this one girl she was just there for a festival from Germany, and it's just a very disgusting sight, and it gives you that visceral reaction that I was talking about before. Should we make sure that the Hamas people are being served under economic globalization, or are they a people that they need to eventually just not be in existence anymore, right? So there's some controversy there. So this is sort of like a loaded question, right? And I think I'm kind of negating the point they're trying to make of not overanalyzing this. So I will say, because if we're talking about people over companies, I'll agree with that, but again, it's a loaded question, so I'm not going to strongly agree or go to the disagree. I'm going to play it safe here. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Again, it's a loaded question. I'd always support my country. First of all, what does support mean? Does that mean would I go to war if there was a draft, no matter what it was? And then my country, what does that mean, support my country? Does that mean, like, let's say our president is currently Joe Biden, and he decides to do something really that's not in agreement with what I believe to be true or correct or my values? Is that my country? Does he represent my country, or is it just the highest, like if over 50% of the people that live in this country believe a certain way or want to do a certain thing, that I would agree with that? I'd always support my country with. And what does right or wrong mean? This is all open for interpretation. But if we were to go back to just my initial inclination to this question, I would go with, let's just do a disagree. We're going to play it safe again. I wonder if this is going to be a pattern in the rest of the questions. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I strongly disagree with that. I do know that being born in America, anywhere in America, and I was born in Wisconsin, anywhere in America, you are one of the luckiest people in the world, particularly by a percentage. Like the people that are born in America, I haven't done the math, but let's just say it's a 0.01% chance that you get to be born in America, and with the fruits of living in America, where you have oceans on both sides that insulate you to a degree from enemies compared to most other countries in the world, where in the Middle East or in Europe or in Asia or in Africa, all these countries are all next to each other, left, right, up, down, north, east, south, and west, and that just leaves you vulnerable to attack more than America. And then with our ways of being able to produce food and I guess products to a certain degree, I know that I am extremely lucky and grateful for being born here. But then, of course, you could always get into the idea of is this God's plan? If there is a God, is this the plan that I'm supposed to be here for a reason? Is reincarnation a thing where maybe I was born in a different country and then I was born here, and we can sort of analyze that. Was I born in this country because I did good in a previous life and I'm being rewarded, as opposed to being born in a very poor country or something? So it's really sort of hard to gauge, and that'll be another video that we can get into another time. But anyways, I'm overanalyzing. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. See, this is a loaded question, that our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. So that is basically setting you up to be a supremacist. That's so stupid. I'm going to put disagree just because I don't like the phrasing of that question. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I will agree with that. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Well, I don't know what international law exactly means. I would assume that that means that you're against atrocities. But, here's the thing. Do I believe that bombing innocent civilians is justified? No. But bombing terrorist organizations, I don't know if that's against international law or not. So, assuming international law allows you to take out your enemies as long as there's no civilian casualties, then I would say military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Again, who made these international laws? I guess, I wouldn't want to be on the short end of that stick either, so I would go with disagree. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I strongly agree to that. Now the economy, we're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Oof. No. I would say I'll disagree with that. People are ultimately divided by... I think that they're more divided by their nation than they are their class. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Again, what does that mean by controlling? How is inflation going to be controlled? Is that a manipulation of the market due to or by government intervention? That's a tough one. And then controlling unemployment. So again, we're talking about the government taking part in the economy and the job marketplace here. So I'm kind of like middle of the road here. Like, this is just, I don't like this question at all. But let's just see here. Is it more important to control inflation or unemployment? I would say controlling inflation is more important. I would say strongly agree to that. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. This is where I'm going to split with the hard right Republicans, that I do believe that a level of regulation is important. Although I have heard horror stories of over-regulation, I don't think that being an anarcho-capitalist where it's free reign will be justified. I read John D. Rockefeller's biography by Ron Chernow, I think, the guy that's done many award-winning biographies of great historical figures, and the proliferation of Standard Oil and what I assume is the environmental impact they did of just pumping out oil everywhere and just sucking everything dry. And just that one movie with Mark Ruffalo about the whatever company not caring that they're polluting the water supply of small towns, and Michael Clayton had a similar theme as well. So I do believe in that. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. We'll say agree. I won't say strongly agree because, again, overregulation is a thing. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. I wonder where I've heard that from one from before. The freer the market, the freer the people. I think this kind of goes back to regulation. I'm going to say agree rather than strongly agree because, again, anarcho-capitalism, that's not what I ascribe to. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. It's never really crossed my mind. Although I understand what they mean, but just because, so like you should be able to drink any water anywhere as long as it's not the ocean, like that's the sort of utopia of Earth or what it was like before we were here. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly disagree. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Regrettable that many personal fortunes? And again, that's also a loaded question. Made by many personal fortunes, that's the game that we all, that's the world we live in. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Let's see what exactly they mean by protectionism. The theory and practice of shielding a country's domestic industries from foreign competition by taxing imports. That's a tough one. Because, again, taxing, you're talking about government intervention, but with what I believe, you got slave labor in China. They're making iPhones that Apple's probably paying $5 an iPhone for when it's all said and done. And you take that to the ultimate degree, we're going to be getting all these products from China, and that means that our workforce would have to be entirely dependent on things other than manufacturing and other things that can just be easily imported from other countries. So I would say I agree with that. And again, this goes back to my theory that I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, that I do believe that some regulation is fine. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. I strongly agree with that. Greed is good. The rich are too highly taxed. I'm not familiar with the tax, and I don't want this video to go too long, so I'm not going to keep looking up different definitions, but I believe that they may be too highly taxed. I think we're all too highly taxed, so I'm going to agree on that. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Strongly agree. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I would agree with that. I don't think you should be able to knowingly lie. I actually think that our laws, and I'll make a video about this, but with the way social media and news is now and how all these false accusations can get charged and these anonymous witnesses or anonymous victims and things of that nature, and a source of a source is quoted in a news article put out by a major publication, I feel that there should be more strict laws when it comes to slander, that if you are proven to be lying or proven to be lying about somebody else, that should be very severely punished. I think that with the way public opinion is nowadays and how something can spread like wildfire and all these opinions get created simply because someone made a rumor and it went viral or something like that, or people sort of dogpile, and we live in the way public opinion tends to work nowadays is guilty until proven innocent. You see that so often, that I really think that people need to be punished more. And this is coming from somebody that actually has been incarcerated, and I understand what court systems are like from the defendant side and what institutions can be like. So I feel that I have a different perspective on that than the general public that hasn't been through that. So I do believe that yes, government should be penalized, or governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Well, you go back to Standard Oil. So the issue is that Standard Oil was getting so big that it was able to crush the competition by any means necessary. And I don't recall exact techniques, but I believe some were to just drain the land from around a smaller oil production company, because they were able to just install stations all around them until they went out of business, or of course selling their oil or gas at such a low rate until the other companies who couldn't just make that profit at all, that they had to go out of business. And that's when actually the muckraker that came out, Ida, muckraker, Ida Tarbell. There we go, Ida Tarbell. Yeah, so genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability. I agree with that. Next page. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. And here's a debate too, because, okay, so should abortion be a form of birth control? I'm going to disagree with that. If I impregnate someone, I wouldn't approve of an abortion. Now, of course, if they're going to get an abortion, that is on them, but that is just something that's so against what I believe to be a humane thing to do that it would not be with my blessing. I wouldn't be with that person if they decided to do that. Yeah, so I agree with that. Should always be illegal. So when a woman's life is not threatened, so what about rape or other things of that nature? So I'm going to disagree, but not strongly disagree. All authority should be questioned, agree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I do agree with that. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Well, I guess, it shows my ignorance. I just assumed that most museums were taxpayer funded. Theaters, I guess maybe the local theater. I was never really a theater goer in the traditional sense of a theater, versus like a movie theater. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up, so it should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I think that theaters and museums are probably both good things that, we want to preserve history and we also want to promote culture. So I'll disagree with that. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory.